So we tend to ask for things that we're not really ready to receive. And, we tend to cry out to God and say, God, help me. I need help for something. I need guidance. I need leadership. But the question becomes, are we ready to receive the very thing that we're asking God for? Are we ready to receive guidance? Are we ready to receive leadership? Or are we just in a position to where we're still wanting to sit in this continuum cycle of stagnation? And I think more often than not, that's where we are. Because in order to receive guidance, in order to receive leadership, in order to receive a teacher, you must, one, first be in a position of a follower. We normally hear the saying that if you are leading and no one is following, then are you really leading? If you're walking and no one is following, are you really leading? Well, I think that's true, but I also think that it is only true when it's used in the right context. And unfortunately, nowadays, when we live in an age where there's lack of accountability, lack of responsibility, I think that is used in a way that we place blame on leadership. We place blame on leadership for them not doing something that we are yet willing to receive. For instance, we want a leader to come into our lives. We want a leader to help us, to teach us, to guide us, and do these things. But like I said, we're not willing to sit in a position of a follower. We want a leader to do all of the work. We want them to spend time with us. We want them to pour into us. We want them to do whatever it is that we've asked God for. But we're like a shield. So whenever those things come to us, it just bounces off. It just falls on the ground. It never actually goes into us to fill us, whatever that leader has for us. One, because when the leader showed up, we flat out rejected them. We looked at them like, who are you? Why are you showing up here? Think about Moses. Moses, unfortunately, as we look at it, unfortunately, was raised in a house of Pharaoh. And so you had the Israelites who were enslaved during that time. And so when Moses finds out really who he is, and um, he starts to come into his actual identity, and then he um, actually has this encounter with God, and God tells him what he is calling for him to do after he spends all of his time on Mount Sinai. He actually comes back and stands in his rightful place and his calling um, to lead his people to God. Because as a leader, we are actually leading you to God, right? Helping to lead you to God. But the Israelites never really accepted Moses as one of their own. And they also never saw him as truly their deliverer. Um, God's Moses spent time with God. He would go and labor, seek God, listen to God, get directions, and all of these things, right? And we're just kind of summing up, generally speaking, right? But if you think about the sacrifice that he would make, even from having to leave Egypt, leave Pharaoh's house, right? And take his place and his identity with the Israelites and lead them out of there. He was always rejected by the Israelites. They never saw him and accepted him as the rightful leader. And whatever direction and whatever wisdom and whatever guidance was given, it was always, well, what is God telling you? And what are we supposed to do? And so that's why they constantly complained, because they never really believed. They always hoped for a leader. They always hoped for the leader that God sent, but they never really received it. Because even when Moses told them, why don't you go and talk to God? Why don't you talk to God? They were like, we don't really want to do that. So did they ever really receive what Moses had for them? And what Moses had for them was helping them to return back to the God that they had always hoped for, that they had always been praying to deliver them out of the desperation that they were in. They never did. And honestly, this is why it was so frustrating for him to begin with. And we understand that Moses was disobedient. That is not something that we can argue against. But from a leadership standpoint, can we understand why that's so frustrating, though? Why we get to a point where leaders literally lose it and say, I can't do this anymore. I want to give up because God, you have me coming back to you. And I'm doing all the things that you are asking me to do. And as much as I know that this is not about me, we are not, as leaders, superhuman. We're not. We are not the ones that are supernatural. We lean on the supernatural strength of God. We lean on the supernatural wisdom of God. But we ourselves are not superhuman. We are not supernatural. But those who look to us act like we are. And so therefore you are never willing to do the amount of work that it costs you to do in order to receive the things that you need to do. We look at leaders and say, I can do it. And you do. We look at leaders and say, well, if they can do it, I can do it. You look at a leader and say, and you think sometimes you are in a place that you're not, because you don't understand the sacrifice that it takes for a leader to receive, to give, and to do, or to be in a position that they are in. And this is why we are never in a position to be the follower that we are called to be. We put so much emphasis on the leader. As a leader, you have to do what God is calling you to do. You have to stand in the position that God is calling you to be in. But we never really emphasize how much, as a follower, you must be in a position that you are called to be, because you are actually called to be a follower. So what are you willing to sacrifice to be the follower that you're called to be, so that you can receive what you need, including the leader? Because that leader is making sacrifices. That leader is going out every day. That leader is sitting before God. But are you willing to pay the cost, to be in the position, to be the follower that you need to be in order to receive what you're seeking God for? Are we really ready to take accountability for our actions today and our lives today, and stop complaining about what's going on in our situations and circumstances, and moving out of stagnation, so that we can stop rejecting leaders, stop putting so much on our leaders, stop putting so much weight on the leader, and start taking accountability for our lives, start taking accountability for our circumstance, start taking accountability for our stagnation. Stop rejecting the very thing that you're asking for. Stop killing your leaders and be a good follower. After all, you asked for your life to change. So receive help and stop killing your health. This is your moment in leadership.